Thank you all for joining today. If you don't know, my name is Laura Oxsen, and this presentation is on the civil engineering training gap. So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Laura Oxsen. I am the founder of Oxsen Learning. I am also the organizational development lead at Grayling Engineers. I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of Oregon and Washington with a little over 12 years of experience in the industry. I'm also a certified learning and development specialist. And lastly, I have a lifelong passion for career development, mentorship, teaching. It's something that I've always loved to do, even back to my high school days. If anyone knows about outdoor school here in like the Northwest area, it's just like a summer camp, but for like science and outdoor education. And I was a student leader for that in the water field study, which funny enough, that's where my interest lies. But I've always loved mentoring. And one of the big things and the reasons why I built Oxsen Learning was to be able to bring together those two worlds, the technical side and the learning, with something more human-centered, something that's built for like real-world applications, something that you would actually use on projects and very specific needs. So to start off, I want to talk about the problem, like the civil engineering gap. Where does that problem start? And that problem is that school teaches you the theory and you have all this information that you're learning, but who teaches you the job? And this is something I've experienced not only myself, but pretty much every person I've talked to in the industry feels this. Like there's some amount of training in every job, but in engineering and civil engineering specifically, there's a lot of information that you need to learn, a lot of different disciplines and specialties you can get into. So it's probably nearly impossible to learn everything, especially how each firm does it through school. So there's this gap created between those two spaces. So what are those gaps? What does that look like? One of the main ones is AutoCAD Civil 3D. That is one primary area where more training is needed. I know a lot of people get the basic AutoCAD training early on through college. Some people even get Civil 3D, but if you do, you know very little about it. Usually you understand how to do surface modeling maybe, or how to not necessarily create surfaces, but how to view them, and maybe add them to a set of plans, maybe do something with alignments, but you rarely get into the full production that we need for our jobs. One of those other things is grading and drainage. That is one that I think a few degrees I've heard of touch on grading design, but a lot of them, including myself, I went to Oregon State, we didn't even talk about grading. And that is a huge part of, I think, not only just site civil, but even in like water design, like you need to be able to understand a site so you can place a reservoir or a pump station. Like we're all building infrastructure, and all infrastructure deals with the ground and deals with needing to grade and make sure it works. Another one that I've seen is constructability. Again, we touch a little bit on this through site visits. I know colleges a lot of times have field trips that they'll put on, but specifically how that applies to when you're designing and how you're able to make sure the design that you're doing works in the real world. That obviously can help through site visits, but that's a big issue when it comes to like new designers. When they haven't seen it, they don't understand necessarily what they're designing and how that fits in. The other item is PS&E assembly. A lot of acronyms in this, so I'll make sure to go through all of those. But that's plans, specifications, and estimates. So that is something that we touch a little bit on each piece, but not necessarily how it comes together as a whole. So for plans, that would be obviously AutoCAD Civil 3D, putting that together. We understand exhibits, but not how that works as a whole. Specifications, we write maybe some technical documents, but not specification formatting and the level of detail that we go into. I think that's, I don't know many people that love to do specifications. There are some special people out there that is their favorite thing to do, but it is one of the reasons I think that is because it's very challenging. There's a lot of detail that goes into that. And then obviously cost estimates is a big one that requires a lot of context. Code and permitting, I think we in school we're given a set of limitations, but we don't necessarily know how to look up like codes for municipalities and see what those limitations are. A lot of our job is finding what that is and being able to know what permitting goes along with that. So that's a huge learning curve, I think, as well. Some other ones, technical writing. There's definitely, this is part of, I think, most curriculums, but I think there's a lot of training still that's needed to get from how you write in college to how we write in the field, how we need to make things very concise and very easy to understand for a lot of different, depending on who your audience is. Site design, that's another big one that a lot of people have never even heard of site civil or site design. It's in some degrees, but even at Oregon State, we didn't talk much about it. You usually had your four engineering types. There was geotechnical, structural, transportation, and water resources. And it's like, oh, pick which one you want and go in that. So a lot of people don't know about this or don't have as much experience in how that plays into all these other parts of the design. And lastly, team delegation. I know some people get into obviously group projects, but the level of experience needed to delegate work to someone is a whole nother skill set and a huge part of our jobs that I think is a learning curve for a lot of people. Even if you're a younger staff member trying to help mentor someone else, like that's a skill that you need early on. You don't have to be up to like a PM level or a team lead to need this skill. So there's, like I mentioned, there's this gap and there's a cost to getting it wrong. There's a cost to just ignoring these things. Um, and the price tag, you can see here, I have two different versions of this graphic that I've created. There's some statistics out there, but none of the data is really great. So I didn't want to put dollar figures to this, but usually there's an investment that you need to do before you're even hired. There's obviously recruiting, onboarding, a lot of administration. So before you even hire someone, they're starting to cost the firm money. And this is like the standard method. If you continue on, there's a lot of learning, obviously, as they go. And then eventually they'll start climbing out of that with some billable work that they can do. And eventually you'll get to a point where they can break even and then start making money for the firm. So that is the standard method, and it just takes time. And I think I've heard some terms of it takes about 2 years for someone to break even. But that is just the original method. Over here, the way that I like to look at it is what do you do if you add a higher investment in your training? Um, when you're starting, same thing, you drop down a significant amount because you're investing in training. However, that training is more time for that person to get going. So that's like that new hire that goes in. They still have to take the time to learn before they can be productive. But if you invest early, then you're able to break even a lot faster. You get that person up to speed in the very specific training that they need. They will have a lot faster break even though it seems like it may be more expensive. Sometimes this line may even dip below depending on what your dollar investment is, like in an external training program. However, you also have to think of the other costs of the firm, like taking that senior staff away and having them train them up. That is money that your firm is not getting back. So I like to think of this as the investment. Early investment allows you to break even earlier. So what are firms doing right now? Like, how are we learning? There's a lot of different ways I've seen people approach this. Some people do a myriad of these things. Some people do just a few. One of those on-the-job training, I think that's pretty standard for a lot of firms, is if you don't have anything in place, well, you're going to learn on the job. Um, and I'll go through each one of these. You can be paired with a mentor. You can have an internal training program, lunch and learns, external webinars, YouTube and slash self-directed learning, or buddy or peer pairing. So there's all these different things, but what from this is missing? Why don't these fully capture the needs that we have? So first, I want to define what the target is. What do we actually need to learn well? And this is something I developed that is specific to civil engineering, although it probably could apply to other fields as well, but it's specific to how we learn as civil engineers. And so what we need to actually learn, one of the first and most obvious ones is this needs to be built from experience. Also, sorry about the noise in the background. Hopefully it's not too loud and you can still hear me. It's trash day. So um, So, built from experience, that is a pretty obvious one. We need the people that are training us to understand what they're doing so that they can train other people well. The next thing is it needs to be short and efficient. So this needs to be tailored to the information that you need to know at that time and nothing more. Think of things like college. It gives you a great background on theory, but a lot of times it's a lot more information than you really need. And so when we're in the working world and our companies are built on billable hours, that's how we make money. Your time is very precious. And so we can't afford to teach people way more than they need, especially at the beginning. We need to be focused and efficient and to the point and get them the training that they need at the very beginning. Next one, on demand. So something being on demand is really important because it allows that the person that's receiving the training to get it when they need it. So when they start day one, they can show up and have something to start learning at their schedule. I know there's a lot of webinars out there that sometimes it may be months before you can sign up for that. So having something ready when the person needs it so they don't have to wait for someone to be free, I think is really important. The next one is deadline proof. The learning can't stop just because people have deadlines. It's really important that we all get busy, and those people that are mentoring and training, as soon as a deadline hits, you have to choose between, do I have this person's training moving forward, or do I get this job done and get it out the door? And sometimes it's not even a choice you're actually making, it's just you're reacting, and then you realize by the end of the week, oh man, I haven't talked to that person in a while. Oh, I hope they're doing okay. I hope they're learning. So having something that's a deadline proof so that the training doesn't stop when things are ramping up at the company. The other thing is built to scale. Obviously, there's a growing amount of work in our industry. The training that we have needs to be able to scale with that demand. It can't be something where you have a one-on-one person and you have 3 new hires and you need to train them all. If that person's overloaded, that is not scalable. So you need something that can scale no matter how many people you need to bring on. Next is having a standardized baseline. So that is making sure that you know what every new person that comes in, you understand their knowledge base. So a lot of us, again, come from different degrees at different colleges, and we show up and everyone has a different baseline. So bringing them up to speed on the same thing so that when, let's say, another team may need help, you already know, okay, they've gone through our training program. I know what they understand. I can go ahead and delegate them this task, and I know what their basis is. I have that standardization. You don't have to be constantly guessing where every new hire is at. You know their baseline. So having something standardized. Next is low company effort. And this isn't necessarily dollars wise, but this is how much effort does it take the company to put something together. So this is more geared towards something like an internal training program. Again, there's so many different facets of our jobs. I think most firms have so many different specialties. Even if you're specialized, let's say in water, wastewater, there's so many different things you can get into. And so spending the time to develop in-house, depending on your size, an entire training program that covers everything, that is a lot of company effort. And if you're relying on people internally that are also engineers, that again is going to come into the deadline proof part where there's such a high load that as soon as you're busy, that stops. And if there's a lot of effort, things usually fall to the back burner, and it's not something that is able to be prioritized among all the other things firms are trying to do, whether it's developing their organization, their systems, their HR programs. There's so much to work on as a company that adding on training to that is a whole specialty. So going through each one of these, I want to explore the myriad of solutions we've had and how that stacks up against the 7 learning needs. So first on the job training, again, that's one of the most standard ones. Where it delivers is you get to learn besides senior staff, which is one of the most valuable things. Someone that's been through it, you get to hear on a specific project what's happening. You get answers in the moment as well. As you're working on things, you're able to work with someone. It's also free. I put that in quotes, free because you don't have to pay a cost externally, but it does cost hours. But there's no like contract or additional money you need to put towards something. It's just your internal staff. Where it falls short is this only works when someone is free. So again, like I said, with the deadlines, it's not deadline proof. It's not scalable. As people get busy, training drops off. Even if it's on the job, if your senior staff doesn't have additional time to train someone on that project, they're going to take that on themselves or give it to a more experienced person. So that's where things start breaking down. Again, like I said, dropped under deadlines. When you're busy, these things tend to go away. It's also the luck of who you sit by. So you could either sit by them or the luck of who you're paired with as either a mentor or the person that's your supervisor. If you happen to get someone that maybe doesn't love training or has trouble prioritizing it, it's all dependent on how much effort they're able to put in alongside their other job that they're doing. And so everyone can have a varying degree of experience with that. Also, everyone learns differently. So that goes with depending on who is training you on the job. And there's a lot of different learning styles. I think engineers, not all of us are inherently great teachers. It's something, a skill we have to learn. And so those that maybe aren't as skilled, that affects the person that's learning. So it's just not something that's standardized again as a baseline that everyone can get that same experience. The second one is mentorship. This one I see a lot, even whether formal, informal programs. Where it delivers is one-on-one guidance. You're able to meet with someone and get that specific feedback similar to the on-the-job training. You also get real career wisdom. So you get information from someone that's experienced it, and then you're able to build that relationship with that person. So again, great thing to do. Where it falls short is sometimes it can be hard to find a match. So that could be maybe someone doesn't have the availability, again, as you scale. If you have a lot of younger staff and not as many mentors, it may be hard to find someone that has the time to match. Going into the time is scarce. So a lot of times mentors, they're the people that are most experienced, have the most workload. Also depends on chemistry. Maybe it's someone that you're not comfortable talking with and opening up with. And so that can really fall on if you're paired with someone and don't feel comfortable, maybe you're not going to be as honest as you probably would with someone that you have more chemistry with and you're able to feel like you can open up with. And then also nothing is written down. So as you meet and you're mentoring someone, you don't necessarily have a record of the things you talked about, and then you're not able to pass that along. So going to the being scalable, it's as you're hearing it in the moment, then it's gone. And so hopefully someone remembers. 3, internal training programs. So where this delivers, it is consistent for everyone. Like I said, you have that standardized baseline. Everyone comes in knowing the same stuff. It's also tailored specifically to your firm. Usually if you're built internally, it can meet all the standards that you want and cover the things that you think are the most important. Also, it's always available, hitting that on-demand area over here. Um, Unless that's requiring you to meet with someone and talk with them, then it kind of can fall apart there. But most of the time, if it's a set of documents, it's always available. And again, scales with the team. You're able to see as more people go, you can just point them to where your resources are and they can get it when they need it. Where it falls short is mostly the expense to build. And that is usually with the amount of company effort that it takes. What I found is if people do have training programs, they usually aren't to the next level as what I think most people that learn. It doesn't cater to all the learning styles, or maybe it doesn't always hit the mark on exactly what someone needs to learn. And that's because they're engineers doing that as their second job. Or maybe they're not an engineer and so they're working with someone and that just takes a long time to build. It also can be slow to update, especially if you have a lot of information. And again, heavy to maintain. It is just a big burden on a company to do. So while it's great and it covers all of these bases, it takes a lot of time and effort to make those things happen. Next up, lunch and learns. I know a lot of companies do this. This is where it delivers is easy, fairly low cost, sometimes even free. Um, so those are things that you can just sign up for, go to. A lot of times they could be webinars, or usually it's someone internal to your company putting it on, getting lunch. It's great because your whole team can go. It doesn't matter if it's a specific person, everyone in the firm can get it. And it can also spark new ideas because most of the time these are in person, and even if they're hybrid, you know a lot of the people, so you feel more comfortable interacting and it creates that conversation. Where it falls short, most of the time they're one and done. Even if you have a repeating like every year, um, it depends on when someone starts and when you can align that with their schedule. So maybe you had this great presentation and then someone starts and they miss it. You can record them. I know a lot of people do that. That's still not the same experience you're getting. And then someone also may not take the time to go and watch that video or know where to find it. Um, you also sometimes can only get to the surface level. That's just due to typically 1 hour during lunch. There's only so much information you can cover there. So you're usually just scratching the surface of what you need. You also typically don't get hands-on practice. I know you sometimes can implement this, but most of the time they're a presentation that you listen to and then you don't go and apply it. Or maybe not specifically because you're not working on that particular problem. Also, they get skipped when you're busy. So when you have deadlines again coming up, people will skip because they know they need to prioritize the project. So it's not necessarily on demand exactly. It has to align with your schedule. Next, external webinars. Where these deliver, they're nothing to organize. You just show up, typically virtually. Um, you can get outside expertise, which is great. So if you don't have that information in your company, you're able to get that outside. Where it delivers, it's often free. Most of them, a lot of like, especially vendors and stuff, will give them out obviously for their product, and you get to learn something that you didn't know on a specialty. Where it falls short is a lot of times they can be generic or maybe not specifically applied to your work. So if it's like a pipe, maybe you don't need to get into all the details of what they're doing, and it only can cover some of the things that you know. Also, passive watching, a lot of times that's you're just watching and you don't have as much interaction, and then rarely hands-on since they're online. The next one, YouTube and self-directed. So this one is where it delivers is free and on demand. There's so many different resources on YouTube, a lot of great information, and you also get to learn at your own pace. You can pause it, rewind it, go back when you need, and it also can answer so many different questions. Uh, there is so much out there. However, where it falls short is the quality control. There may not be everything that you need on a YouTube video, and you don't know and you haven't necessarily vetted the person that's putting that out. So you're just kind of open to hoping someone doesn't come across a video where they're telling you the wrong thing. It's also scattered, not necessarily a learning path. It's just whatever you happen to come across. And a lot of people use this if they're new and maybe they didn't get the direction they needed and someone's busy, they'll revert to something like this to try and fill in some of those gaps. Um, it's also easy to get lost. Again, if you don't know exactly what you're looking for and you're just trying to find the best thing you can spend a lot of time looking for resources. Buddy and peer pairing, where this delivers, it's a friendly first stop. It's someone that can be right next to you, usually lower pressure because, again, they're your peer. You don't have to feel like if sometimes people feel like, oh, there's a stupid question, which I don't think there is a stupid question, but if you feel that way, you're not going to maybe ask someone a question. It's a lot lower pressure to ask someone that's next to you. And again, there's always someone typically available because that's usually the people that have less things to do are your younger peers. Where it falls short is bad habits can spread. So if someone loves doing it a certain way and they teach other people and realize, oh, actually, we don't want to do it that way. Like you don't have that, the same vetting from experience. Again, no real expertise. And this is real expertise as in on a project. They haven't, gone through the same things that a senior engineer has. So they're just relying on the things that they know. So they don't have that depth of expertise. Um, Inconsistent answers, kind of same as these others. Everyone can say something different, so it's not always the best way to get the most consistent answers. So going through all of this, you can see there's no one single option that covers everything here. Um, some of these hit a few of them, some better than others, but you can see it's scattered and there's a lot of gaps that are out here. So that's the one thing you can take away. And people sometimes will try to cover the gaps. Let's say you have on the job training and you're trying to patch that in with YouTube and self-learning. You can see that does have some overlaps, but again, since this still falls short in things like you're self-directed, it's not quality control, you kind of need to have all of these pieces in place to have a well-rounded training program. And so that's why I built Oxsen Learning. That is something that I saw is all of these gaps that needed to be filled. And the way that it worked the best, I wanted to combine all of these things together so it was more holistic. So it was scalable, self-paced, training is available when you need it, and it's something that complements a mentorship and it doesn't replace it. And going back to all of these things, I want to say are great additions. Like if your company is doing any of these, like you're doing something. I just don't think it may not be enough to have these as your standard training process. So my vision is for the things that I want to build is to complement these things. It wouldn't be enough to just rely on one thing, but you also add in mentorship, add in on-the-job training, add in your lunch and learns, keep all of those things you're doing, but just add a solid foundation with that. I want to take a quick minute to pause and see if anyone has any questions. You can feel free to unmute yourself or add something in the chat. Okay. So next up is a little bit inside the program of what I've built. So how the training actually works, it is self-paced, and I'll show you some screenshots. Like that's the next bit of this presentation is showing you what I've built and the areas in which I think it helps to address these gaps. And you can even take some of these ideas away with if you have your own internal training programs and how you can maybe tailor those to meet some of these things. So first, self-paced. That can go at the learner speed. Sometimes videos, even though you can pause and rewind it, someone takes more time to take things in. And I think it's most important that the people that are learning learn it well versus learn it fast. If they learn it fast and just get through the training, that isn't achieving your goal of training in the first place. You want it to be at their pace so they can absorb the information. And we all learn at different speeds. The other thing, it is multimodal. Multimodal, which just means there's a lot of different ways that I train. So things like recorded videos, that's integrated into my trainings, audio, text, and you can actually listen and read at the same time or choose one or the other. A lot of graphics and different like moving graphics as well, so that those concepts really stick and they make sense. The other thing is keep forever resources. So my training programs right now are set to an annual access for 1 year, but there are resources that people can keep forever, including a PDF of the entire course, as well as cheat sheets that people can use and help them get through. Because I've noticed that a lot of times if you go to like an external webinar, you learn the information, you're like, great, I know how to do this. Maybe it takes you 3 months to get into the actual design you're doing, and then you need to go and practice and implement it. Well, that resource is gone. You have to rely on your notes, and hopefully you took good notes. Whereas this one, I wanted it to be accessible, especially for a year is usually a decent amount of time, that when someone has that come up on a project, they can go back and do that workflow. And if it happens after that, they have the resources there that they can go and reference. It's also mobile friendly for those that like to learn on their phone and on the go. That is also an option. I wanted it to make sure that learning didn't have to stop just because you weren't at your desktop. Maybe you wanted to learn in a different area of maybe you want to go in the break room and learn. Maybe you want to just move around a little bit because I know everyone learns differently. So having, you can do it on a tablet or a phone or your desktop. It also has progress tracking. So it tracks your learning. It's its own learning management system in my online portal where they can see how they're doing and how much training they have left. There's also a private peer forum that people are invited to based on the training they take that allows them to interact with their peers outside the company. So outside of your company, they can interact with other people going through the same thing. They can also, that's something that I monitor as well, so I'm able to input and answer questions and exchange ideas with people. So the first thing I wanted to address was the biggest need that I saw, which was drafting and modeling. I found that the largest software needs is AutoCAD and AutoCAD Civil 3D. There's a 92% adoption rate as that those people's if they have drafting, that's the software that they use. I know the main other one I can even think of is MicroStation, and I know not a lot of people use that. I think it's just not very common. So there's a very common industry practice to use AutoCAD, especially Civil 3D at firms. It also is one of the most important things for most companies when they're hiring. They have 78% of people screen for it before anything else. They want to see, do they have AutoCAD? Do they have Civil 3D experience? And the firms rank it as their number one proficiency for entry level hiring. So it's a huge need across the workforce, and people learn just the surface. They scratch just the surface in school, and it's a whole nuanced program that they have to learn. So that is where I started with my very first training that I put together using this framework was AutoCAD Civil 3D. I wanted to make it beginner friendly. It's 20 plus hours and it's in 3 parts. Um, and I tried to make it as condensed as possible. Like I said, very specific, efficient, and to the point. There's a lot of other trainings out there that are longer than this, or maybe about this time that just cover basic AutoCAD, or just cover basic Civil 3D, but I feel like those go over and above what someone needs when they start. I think just getting a very good baseline of how the tools work, and then you can apply it and learn from your mentor based on job specific needs. So example, you would learn how to do a corridor. You'd learn a very basic method of that so you know where everything is, how to navigate it, and then on a project, someone knows that they don't have to teach you, okay, well, click this button. Now click this button. It's like they've already gone through that and they can more teach specifics on a job. So the course structure that I have one workflow that's broken up into 3 parts. The first part is design workflows. Second part is drafting foundations. And the third part is 3D modeling. So I'm going to go over and show you some screenshots again, like I mentioned, and kind of go over all of these parts. So the first part one is design workflows. And that is, I'm not going to read through every single title here and everything, but at least you can kind of take a glance. But it really is meant to have people understand why we're using AutoCAD. So before you even get into the software, you know why you're using it. You know the point of what you're doing. So what this looks like, you want to start with the end in mind, like I mentioned. The whole goal of what we're trying to do with AutoCAD is create a buildable plan. So framing before they even get in of what are we doing here. Also making sure they know how we balance constraints, like you have physical constraints, client needs, and regulatory rules. I think framing that helps someone when they're going in, it helps them understand what to really put time to. Like, as long as it's buildable, we don't need to spend all of our time making the exact perfect layout to print. You can see here's a journey of a plan. If you spend all of that time trying to make the exact perfect alignment of where this line is and make it dead center, well, maybe that's a lot of time you don't need to be spending. Like how this line is offset over here is just fine. It doesn't need to be a perfect dimension. So kind of understanding what you're doing and where to use your time. The other thing I have is you don't need AutoCAD to have this. Obviously, it's great to practice, but I go through things like this. This is a hotspot image. So every time you click on these, it shows you like, oh, this is the command line. Then I have the audio overviews there. Oh, the first thing you need to do is click one point, and then you need to specify your endpoint. And if you come up here, there's a lot of other ways you can also do it. So just quick ways that someone without getting overwhelmed by getting into the software can kind of understand and have their framework. The other thing I talk about is XREFs, like how do we, what does the collaboration loop look like? When we have our drawings and we need to send it to someone else, how does that work? Like who's using our CAD file? So making sure they understand how that fits in. The part two is much longer. Part one is only about 30 minutes. Part two, I think, is about 8 hours. And this is where you get into your drafting foundations. You could have never opened AutoCAD before and be able to open it and learn where everything is, understand the interface, file types. That's all in section one. Section two, I get into the model space, how you draw and organize. And then third is I go into how you print and present stuff. So I'll go through a few screenshots of that. So you can see here is another interactive module that shows you every single line. Again, this is very specific. And this is sometimes things that people don't go through a new person. They're just like, here, you can draw lines in CAD, but they don't explain the difference between a line and a polyline. So not having that foundation when you start, someone can take a lot longer by doing something a way they didn't know there was a faster way. I also go through the entire interface so you are framing about what you're looking at, what each of these areas are called, and then finally, again, taking a step back and understanding how AutoCAD works, and that's speaking a language. So usually how it works is you have a command, you put that into AutoCAD, it then follows up with a question, you then need to respond to that question, and then from that you get an output. So understanding how the software works, I think, is really important as well. The other thing I pay attention to is drawing with precision and understanding when you are drawing, like here I show exactly what it looks like to draw a line, and then I go over it over a video so they can watch me do it, and then talk about, again, precision, why precision matters, what happens when you don't eyeball it, especially when we're drawing things that need to be staked out. If you're off by just a little bit, that can really throw things off. So I make sure to add those little lessons learned in there. Selecting and organizing, I go through how to select objects. So this is one that I see, again, that can cause a huge time sink, that if you don't know the software well, you can spend a lot of time. So even simple as like, what are the 3 methods you can select objects? And one of them is a cross selection. That's my favorite, but there's also a selection window or just clicking something. If people don't know this, there's a lot of our time that's spent just clicking around to select things and deselect things. And again, it can eat up a lot of your time if you don't know the tricks on how to do it correctly. Also layer management. Again, this is another huge time sink and I think a learning gap when people don't understand all the functionality of layers. There's just a lot of time spent finding why something didn't print well, what's going on, what layer is it on. Having a good foundation of that helps people to understand and get through things a lot quicker. Also, dynamic blocks is something that's important. Goes through how to, again, make your site more efficient and design more efficient. And then lastly, talking about going from the screen to printing out, going through exactly what those printing settings are, understanding paper sizes, going through what's called CTB or STB, and that's just the way that colors are matched or how you see things in AutoCAD, how that translates to paper. Again, I did not know any of these things from college. It was something that I just kind of figured out on the job through people teaching me, and it can take a lot of time away if people don't understand how to plot things correctly for construction. And then the last part is 3D modeling. This is the bulk of the course, starting off with what Civil 3D is versus basic AutoCAD, how all of these things play together, then moving on to section 2, which is building the model. That's all of your points, surfaces, corridors, all of your actual modeling design. And then third is the final output and sharing. So with that, the Civil 3D environment. So again, this is an example of, I do a lot of graphics so you can see how all these things fit together. That's something that I've seen that a lot of people don't understand when they start is, I see all these different tools, but how do they all relate? What's the big picture of what I'm building? And so understanding how they all relate and impact each other before you start really helps you understand and frame why certain things are important over others. And I've had people that have been in there for years that realize, oh, no one's ever explained that to me before. Oh, I had no idea that's how that worked. And so just taking that step back and making sure that happens, again, going with the standardization, making sure everyone has that same base level understanding before they get in. And then going through the command center, like your tool space, what does it look like? Not everyone takes the time to go and explain all of these things, and go back and reference like, hey, where would I find this piece of information? You can learn that here. Lastly, this is an example, something that I didn't know what it was called, but I've always seen, oh, it's just the blue menu that pops up. It just happens. That's called a contextual ribbon, and you can understand why it pops up and when to look for it and when it's helpful. Like understanding all these things, again, helps someone know what to look for in the future as opposed to getting years down the road and not realizing there's the tool that would make their job a lot more efficient and easier to do. The next thing I get into is styles, label styles, object styles, table styles, how to work things dynamically. That's again another skill that is sometimes a drafting skill, sometimes a modeling skill, because a lot of modeling we need to be able to display things in certain ways so that we understand what's happening and we can measure things like surface calculations, like earthwork calculations is what I was trying to say. You need to be able to set styles to be able to correctly measure those things. So learning all the different styles, how they work, learning how to build Civil 3D labels and tables. And then also honing in on building custom labels. This is another one I see a big time sink in. Oh, we need this custom label. Well, if you're not in this interface, it is not very intuitive. Even so many years in the industry, I have to remind myself, what do I have to click to make this align here? And it just can take a long time. So I have a cheat sheet for that I give. So it's a lot faster for people to develop their own labels, what the composer looks like, and then this is what it looks like when people practice. So it's important, like I mentioned, to when you learn it and you see it happen, and then you do it. So making sure you're following up with practicing what you're learning in the actual software. So here it says, okay, create a custom label. Well, how do you do that? Here's the specific steps. Here's what I want you to do so that they do that on their own. Then I get into modeling the terrain. So here you can see this is surfaces, feature lines, grading objects. Those are some of the preliminary things you need to do grading. And I like to create a lot of graphics so that you kind of, again, step away from AutoCAD and like you don't get so sucked into the software that you take a step back and understand what it is that you're looking at and point out those important things that when they get in the software, they can, if they're a visual learner, they can remember that and it kind of helps them anchor that in their mind a little bit better. Then I go over the design backbone, parcels, alignments, and profiles, again, with all these graphics and explaining what they are, the differences that you can have between different things. And then getting into road cross sections, so assemblies and sub-assemblies, what that looks like. Here's a visual, and then here's what it looks like in CAD. So you're not just seeing like this nice graphic and you don't understand how it looks like in CAD. I also follow up with, here's how it actually looks. Here are the different tools you can use. And then getting into corridors, that's where you put all of that together. And again, I go through how to see that, or they can watch me do that live. And then go through editing and refining corridors. I do a lot of GIFs, which is just moving pictures so they can quickly see what I'm trying to talk about. And then you can see here, this is a process block that I like to use that shows someone can just click through the different steps with screenshots and understand how you would create something. And then how that all comes together, again, with corridors, this is what it looks like. This is what you're actually creating with the corridor, is this top code or a surface. So getting into some of those terms that they hear, that they understand when they hear create a top code, they're not just like, what does that mean? I have no idea. Someone told me to do it, so I did it. Like they have the context for what that means. And then here's something that's, I think a lot of people don't do a lot and they always seem to forget is sample lines and section views that allows us to analyze what we're designing. I also have included workflows for that. Lastly is our utilities. This one is gravity pipe network, so it goes through what they are, the different structures versus pipes, and how to place those things. Also go through pressure pipe networks, which I know is one of the bigger lifts for people to learn. I go through not only how to lay it out, but how to dynamically update it with the tools in Civil 3D, and then how to even set up your own pressure parts list. Because this in and of itself, if it's not set up, can be again, another large time sink. Lastly, at the end, I give some tools that people can walk away with, so that these are PDFs that you can download, and then also knowledge assessments. So this one's at the end, but there's knowledge assessments throughout to make sure that someone understands what it is that they're learning. I also, the way I really like to do this is there's unlimited choices. So it's not about getting it right the first time, it's about learning. So that's one of the key parts that I like to teach is the whole important part is not that you're perfect the first time, you learn it and you understand it. So if you get it wrong, that's going to stick in your brain that, oh, I got that wrong. I know what it would be for next time. So you have unlimited choices that you can go through, but it's really geared on learning, again, not getting the best score. What's on the roadmap? The next training that is in the works is grading design. It will still be several months before this is rolled out, but again, this is another one that is something you can build on from the Civil 3D portion, but it's meant to have people understand how drainage works, flow arrows. This is one of the biggest, again, time sinks or things that I see as a gap in learning from school. Some people have never even seen it or know how to do it. Some people have a little bit of knowledge on it, but it is one of the things that you need to start with before you can do a lot of other design. So you show up to a site, you need to know how it drains, how you can grade it before you set your utilities. It affects how your site layout is. So not understanding these basic things, usually that's a senior person that has to do the grading because usually younger staff don't have that training. So trying to get people up to speed faster, especially on this thing that the design hinges on, and you can actually spread that work now, not just the most experienced grading designer, but anyone on the team that has this experience now. So that wraps up my presentation. So I want to thank you all for coming, and I'm hoping we can close this training gap together. I'm going to open it up for questions. Again, if you want to connect, you can scan this QR code. But yeah, opening up for any questions.
Hey there. Yeah, I have a few questions.
Yeah.
Just more so curious in what you think about on a couple of different things. We're as you know, we're currently using your program for some of our newer employees and looking forward to using it a little bit more. So first, the grading module that you referenced, obviously something I'm very interested in. Is that going to be like a separate module, or is that something that's going to be part of like the overall training?
That is going to be a separate module. It's going to be its own separate course.
Okay.
It's meant to overlap. It doesn't really overlap. The Civil 3D is meant to understand the basic tools, so it doesn't really get into extreme depth on like what slopes do you need to set things to. This grading one adds on, so it doesn't go into detail on necessarily how to use the tool, but it's how to apply it in the engineering sense.
So, like someone who hadn't taken the first one but has maybe a year or two of experience already with CAD could just jump straight to that module if
Yes,
they wanted to explore grading. Okay,
absolutely.
great.
Yep.
That is good to know. My next question, I guess, would be, I think a lot of things you talk about involve kind of like how there's lots of different ways to train, but none of them kind of hit all of the areas that you really want to hit. And
Hmm.
obviously, your program probably does a better job of that than all of the things you listed. I'm assuming, but I'm curious if you think that there are any other gaps that maybe you wished that this training program would have covered, but kind of doesn't because you kind of need some of that in-person stuff. And I'm mostly asking that because if we're using the program, I can't just assume that like, all right, you took the program, you're trained, right? There's got to be
Yeah.
other, and of course the other thing is actual real life work experience and actually using it on
Yes.
projects. But is there another gap there that we, as people who are using your programs, you think we should be considering when we like say incorporate your thing into our overall training program?
Yeah. I think the main one is like the real world project experience. And then
Yeah.
taking this is, yeah, meant to set the foundation for it. So
Mhm.
um, it would be like, let's say, I would encourage people to have whatever they have already incorporated, keep what you have. Just add this in at the beginning so those things are more effective. So, like the mentorship and the lunch and learns, those are still great because they create the conversation and the relationship with everyone within your company.
So
Um,
yeah. So you would
So
say
I
this kind of like multiplies that and works together with that
yes.
rather than replaces it. Okay, yeah, that's
Yes,
good to know.
absolutely. And there is like I said, there's an online forum, but there is something different about like building that team at your company. Like that's not something anyone can replace, and I think can continue to happen. And that on the job training, I think, is always going to happen. So mostly like the in-person human connection, I think keeping those things. And then external webinars that like it's still good to have those to cover like one-off niche pieces of information. Like, oh, I never would know this specialty, but I'm interested in it. I think it's still good to have that, but I don't think all of those things are necessary except for like that in-person interaction.
So, and this is more of just a curious thing if you came across any information on this in your training and learning. But hot topic is working in office versus working remotely.
Hmm.
Um, is there any information or data or anything like that on, obviously since over the last 5 or 6 years, a lot more people are working remotely, thus they kind of don't have that training by osmosis,
Hmm.
who you sit next to, what you overhear kind of
Hmm.
aspect of their training. Has there been, and so a lot of companies, of course, are thinking about bringing people back to the office more. Some already have, some
Hmm.
are thinking about it. Has there been any, I don't know, I guess what's your opinion on that? Is being in person versus being remote something you seems to be truly an impactful experience, or have you seen it doesn't really matter, or is there any data that's popped up over the last few years of the increase of that's kind of indicated one way or the other?
Yeah, I think there is. I don't have specific data and like numbers on that, but
Yeah.
my experience is it definitely is great to be in the office. I think there's a huge value to sitting next to someone and like that you do miss out on that when you're working remotely. But that's not to say that working remote can't be done, especially like more of a hybrid. Like my favorite is the some type of flexibility hybrid so that you are at least seeing people in person if you can, but not like that's also not always a reality with whatever may it be
Mm,
the way that your company is structured, the way you're trying to hire talent just outside of your area because maybe you can't find people that you need. I think it can happen, especially with my training program. I this sets your baseline so that that's less of an issue. Like you all know the same things, like you at least cover your bases no matter what your working situation is and then you can still implement those things like lunch and learns to have that like camaraderie and connection so that if that's maybe a restriction because of whatever phase of life someone is in, what their circumstances are, that this helps to bridge that a little bit. But definitely being in the office, I do think there's huge value. I don't think it's the only way to do it. And I think there's other ways to do it successfully. But yeah, you can't always ignore that. You can't say
yeah.
there's no value to having people in person because there definitely
Yeah.
is.
Cool. No, that's all I got. Thank you.
Awesome. Great questions. Yeah, is there any other questions anyone has? I'll give it just a few more minutes. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Again, there's going to be a recording that's sent after for you can forward it along to people that don't that weren't able to attend today. So with that, I will let you all go finish your 2 minutes before your lunch ends, if you didn't already.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks,
Yeah,
Laura.
thank you all.